Today I will be buying or selling all of my stock for each member of the Cleveland Cavaliers. The way this works is I'll be evaluating each player based on how they played last season, and then from there I'll decide if this is a good time to buy or sell on their value heading into the new year. So I'm hoping this will make it a little more complicated than just simply buying on good players and selling on the bad players, because I'm going to be weighing their value on how they left off from last season. For example, let me start this off with a shocker and say I might buy up some Niang stock. Not all of it, but I might take a few shares because I can't imagine that Niang will be worse than he was last season. Now, if you're subscribed to this channel or follow me on Twitter, which you should go do both of those things, I'd really appreciate it if you're not, but if you're familiar with my takes, then you know I'm not a huge fan of Niang's on-court production. Now, he seems like a great guy off the court, and I do think fans can take things a little too far with the insults, but as an NBA player, Niang has certainly left much to be desired. Last season, he shot a career-low 37% from deep, which actually sounds better than how it felt watching him. He was a complete negative on defense, he didn't offer much in terms of rebounding, and really, Niang was only a positive when he was knocking down shots, and it didn't feel like that happened very often. So actually, I'm kind of talking myself out of buying this stock because I don't foresee Niang becoming a better defender or rebounder at this stage in his career, and I'm not quite sure if a modest increase to his three-point percentage would make up for any of those limitations, so no, I'm actually going to sell my Niang stock after all. I'm just going to take the loss here, but the point of starting with Niang was to show you that hopefully this exercise will be a little more interesting, as there is some incentive for me to play the fictional market and try to get a good deal on these players. And so as I work through this list, please let me know in the comments who you would prioritize on the market and who you would buy or sell the most of. Next up, let's talk about Craig Porter Jr., and this one might surprise you because I have been driving the CPJ hype train since last Summer League, but I think I might sell my stock, and let me explain why. I always believed that Porter would become a solid backup point guard in the NBA, which would be a huge success for an undrafted prospect. And I still believe in that path for Porter, but his stock has risen so quickly that to this day I see people suggesting that Porter should play over Darius Garland and all sorts of crazy stuff on Cavs Twitter. So I'm going to sell my stock, not because I don't believe in Porter's development, but because I think this is the best time to sell my stock and cash out a big check. Porter has the playmaking and athleticism to succeed in the NBA. He just needs to develop a little bit of a three-point shot and take smarter shots overall in my opinion, but I do think he has a long career ahead of him. Now I'm going to speed up a bit and get a few players out of the way so this video isn't an hour long. Dean Wade, I'll take some Dean Wade stock. Listen, I don't like that Cleveland has relied on Wade as much as they have over the last few years. I do think he has some confidence issues that are kind of difficult to solve, and he doesn't have the best injury track record, but when he is healthy, Wade is the closest thing to a 3-and-D wing on this roster, so I can't in good faith sell all of my stock on Wade Island. I will, however, happily take the last plane out of Caris LeVert Island because that place has become a nightmare. Look, LeVert is a fun player, he's entertaining, and he's legitimately worked his ass off to develop into a better off-ball threat and perimeter defender during his time in Cleveland, but I'm selling all of my real estate here. He's too inconsistent, his best skills overlap too much with the starting backcourt, and I'm just ready for the LeVert roulette experience to end. One player who could help bring an end to that experience is rookie Jaylon Tyson. Now let me be clear, it's the 20th pick in the draft, so this is almost never going to be an instant impact player for a playoff contender. And so while I'm not predicting Tyson will rapidly change things for the Cavs, I do believe in the long-term vision here. I think within a few years, Tyson has all of the tools to be a fantastic complementary piece for this roster. He can do a bit of everything, and so I'm clearing land to build my penthouse on Tyson Island when the time comes. Okay, so the next player on this list is someone who is maybe the most interesting player to consider in this little thought experiment, and that would be Evan Mobley. I don't know how to accurately evaluate Mobley's value right now. It really depends on who you ask. Some people consider him a huge disappointment, while some are still holding on to the dream, so I'll just keep it simple. I'm buying whatever you are selling. If you think Mobley is a disappointment, well, I feel confident he is going to prove you wrong in due time. And if you think Mobley's ceiling is still sky high, then I'm right there with you. Look, I'm not as confident in his offensive game as I was at the time of the draft. Back then we thought maybe this was baby KG or the next Tim Duncan. Since then we've seen Mobley struggle a little bit more with his handle and jump shot. But I still see all of the potential for him, and that playoff series against Boston just showcased a tiny glimpse of what Mobley can become, so I'm still on board with this one. I'm going to buy up that Mobley stock. And that same narrative goes for our next player, Darius Garland. I don't think any player on the roster has a greater chance of bringing a boom to the stock market than Darius Garland. Last season was a mess for reasons that I have talked about at length on this channel, and so with a full summer to put all that nonsense in the rearview mirror, I expect Garland to take off next season and bring his value back to that all-star status that we enjoyed a few years ago. Garland stock is about as low as it can get, so this just makes sense to buy in while you can. Next up, Sam Merrill is a player who falls into a similar category as Craig Porter Jr. because the Merrill mania was so contagious that, I get it, a few of us got a little carried away. Merrill is a ton of fun, he's the best movement shooter on the roster, so I am fully on board with getting him more minutes next season, but he does have a few things left to prove, and he did fall out of the playoff rotation for good reason. Mainly, he had a hard time consistently freeing himself up for clean shots. Last season, once the competition read the book of Merrill, it became way harder for him to find an opening. And that led to Merrill jacking up some ridiculously difficult shots that he's capable of making and just had to take in order to justify him being out there, but overall, those shots just weren't good for the offense. And so I actually do think that Kenny Atkinson can help resolve this issue because last year, Merrill was often the only one moving away from the ball, and that made it way too easy for a defense to plug up the gaps. Like, imagine if an NFL team just sent one wide receiver on a route while everyone else was blocking for the QB. That's basically how Sam Merrill was moving off ball last year, so I'll be buying up that stock even though I'm not sure if it will grow as large as some market experts might predict. Let's finally get this one out of the way. I can't imagine anyone is selling their Donovan Mitchell stock, right? You could have made an argument maybe that Mitchell was starting to shrink in the NBA playoffs after struggling against Dallas and New York in back-to-back seasons, but then he delivered one of the most jaw-dropping playoff performances I can remember watching, literally willing his team to victory on one good leg. So Mitchell was an absolute stud last season. He's been a stud since landing in Cleveland, and yeah, you'd have to be out of your mind to sell your Mitchell stock right now. The only explanation that I could see is maybe you're a bit worried about his knee injury carrying over and sticking with him, but I think we've seen that Mitchell can still find a way to be a special player even if he's not relying entirely on his athleticism. Now we've only got a few players left on this list, so let me quickly say if you enjoy this content and you want to support my channel, all you have to do is hit subscribe and drop a like. Those two things go a long way towards helping me out, and I can't thank you enough. Next up is Max Strus, and you know what? I'm buying this one too. Strus showed that he can be an impactful player even when his three-point shot isn't falling. He was a strong defender and secondary playmaker, and Strus carried this threat of heating up at any moment that kept him exciting. That Dallas game will be burned into my memory forever, and while Strus was more inconsistent than I would have hoped, he was still an overwhelming positive for most of the season, so I'm not wavering on my faith here. Strus is a great asset for this team, and I can only hope that the Cavs find a true starting small forward so that Strus can stop being overexerted and playing out of position. I think the trickle-down effect of adding a small forward and moving Strus to the bench to let him be your sixth man would reap rewards for this Cavs team. But either way, I'm keeping Strus stock in my portfolio. Now I've decided I'm not really going to talk too much about the two-way players in this video because I think it's kind of silly not to just buy stock in Emoni Bates or JT Thor. They're on two-way deals. This is a cheap pickup that could be easy money in a few years, so that leaves us with two remaining players who are actually on the roster. Ty Jerome is a player who you might be better off cutting your losses and selling while you can. His ankle injury last season was incredibly bizarre, and I'm not even sure if Jerome will be available throughout the upcoming season, but he has been seen playing basketball this summer, so who knows. If he's available, he's a tall guard who takes care of the ball and shoots three-pointers efficiently, so this is an easy buy if I can believe in Jerome's health and availability long term. And so why not? I'll take some Jerome stock, and that moves us to our last player, the beloved Jarrett Allen. I don't know why anyone would sell Jarrett Allen stock at this point. He's as consistent and reliable as it gets. Allen is an elite defensive anchor who does all of the little things that don't show up on a stat sheet. He's one of the best teammates in the league, and you get your money's worth from this guy time and time again. And if anyone is selling their stock, I will gladly take it from you. So recapping my list, I am selling all of my stock on LeVert and Niang. I'm cashing out on Craig Porter because I think the market is red hot for him even after a pretty ugly summer league stint. I'm tentatively buying on Jerome, Wade, and Merrill, though I don't feel too great about any of those. And I'm basically just holding my stock on Mitchell, Allen, and Strus. Lastly, I'm buying up all of the stock for Darius Garland and Jaylon Tyson because those are the guys who I think will bring back the biggest returns relative to their current value. So that's how I would sort all of this out. Again, feel free to let me know in the comments who you would buy or sell this upcoming season. And with all that being said, go Cavs.